Hi, Shishty. Welcome to the Remex show.
Thank you.
So glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Would love to start with just understanding what your role is and also tell me a little bit about how's the show been for you.
Absolutely. So I lead North America Zone's analytics technology for omni-channel growth group within Kraft Heinz, which previously was called Ecommerce, but now with the restructure that just happened around March, April, we are calling it omni-channel growth. And I specifically belong to the omni-channel growth intelligence group. So I look at everything analytics technology within the business. And the session so far and the grocery shop so far has been amazing. Definitely hectic because this is my first time. So it's just been like talking to a lot of people, seeing the cool things that everybody's doing, what's happening in the retail market, attending all of these like amazing sessions that have been going on every day, and also having like one-on-one conversations with like hosted meetings or just like any other networking sessions that people have like invited me to. It's been pretty eye-opening.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show. It's good to have you. Uh, Analytics technologies. So, what does that exactly entail? Can you talk to us a bit about the scope of the role and how are you thinking about developing analytics technologies at
Yeah,
Kraft?
absolutely. So analytics technology, again, it's a huge umbrella, right? So
Yeah.
anything, think about anything from data to like how do we incorporate that data? How am I ingesting that data? Where am I feeding that data into our data lake Snowflake? And then what do we do with that data? Does that feed into? Be it like P&Ls, be it digital shelf reporting, which everybody right now is talking about. You heard perfect stores, perfect screen. Building all of that up so that our media teams, our supply chain teams, our sales teams can look at those insights and then know where they need to focus on, where the money should go, where they should be investing if our stock is up to date. If not, then how do we reduce those gaps? So it's learning all of those things, presenting them to the business. And now with like omni-channel, it's not just e-commerce anymore. We are also trying to incorporate brick and mortar to compare where, you know, how brick and mortar is doing, how e-commerce fits into that. What are the gaps between the two? What are the learnings between the two that we can apply from e-commerce to brick and mortar or from brick and mortar to e-commerce and just continue to grow the business?
Srishi, that's great. When I look at brick and mortar and I compare that to e-commerce, these have very different sort of blueprints. Brick and mortar is like quarterly JBPs. E-commerce is minute by minute JBPs. You can make decisions every minute if you want to. Brick and mortar, you have one or two large purchase orders every once or twice a quarter, and e-commerce, you're probably getting like even eaches, like small purchase orders with a large number of purchase orders, small quantities, and stuff like that.
Right.
Trade spend is so differently deployed. You can almost be very real time in deploying trade spend, which is also kind of retail media, how we deploy.
Right.
How are you thinking about, like, say, bridging the gap, or how is the evolution? How are you thinking about the evolution of a traditional company, a 100-year-old company like Kraft, and sort of getting ready with this new blueprint?
So I think one thing that works for us is we are not D2C. So I would see that exactly, the challenges that you just mentioned are more appropriate or like more relevant for somebody who's D2C versus us because we work with Walmarts and Amazons of the world, right? So we are looking at how they are presenting our data, what our customers buying e-commerce and in brick and mortar. So our stock is basically what that retailer has in their shelves or in their brick and mortar. So we, even for e-commerce, we proxy it to like zip codes and look at how our products are stocked, where we are out of stock, and that's how. So there's a lot of like similarities between brick and mortar and e-commerce for us in that sense. So that those challenges, yes, they do exist. They're not as relevant for us in that sense, but we do have other challenges because brick and mortar hierarchy comes from IRI, whereas ours also is based on IRI, but it's not a direct one-to-one mapping. So for us, the challenge is more like, are we speaking the same languages as brick and mortar? Because now that we're trying to compare the two, where are those gaps and how do we edit? One, how do we assess those gaps? Second, how do we close those gaps so we can see both the businesses together and they're talking the same language versus separate languages?
So the KPIs, you're kind of trying to use similar KPIs. You're trying to measure them in the same
the
way.
NSVs, the market share, perfect screen, perfect store, all of that is very, very relevant.
In the beginning, you talked about actionability of the data. Like actionability, do you see differences in how, say, you would be deploying actionability in brick and mortar versus e-commerce?
It will be interesting to see that because we've just started like looking at brick and mortar data, right? So we're trying to look again, once we figure out where those gaps are, we can see how we action on them. So recently, actually just last week, we started having these conversations with our brick and mortar counterparts. So we do have this thing called perfect screen. I'm sure in a few of the sessions you may have heard that word quite a few times. It's basically three key KPIs that we look at: share of search, availability, and content syndication scores, right? And how do we apply that same thing to perfect store within brick and mortar? Because brick and mortar is also looking at the same thing. How are they doing on the shelf? What is, if they're in stock or out of stock, and does the box or your product show the right content that the customer is looking for? So similarities, but just the way of looking at those things is different. So how do we merge the two, and how do we make sure that the whole organization is talking about both of them together and not individually?
And how about when you think about timeliness of actions? Is there something that you're thinking about where you're making, as an analytics leader, are you enabling your organization to be more agile in e-commerce?
We are very agile. Everybody in the company is talking about agile. We started doing like pods, and it's not just like within e-commerce; it's throughout the organization. It's one of our core pillars, core values, to be more agile, get there quicker, learn, fail, and learn quicker. And with that in mind, I think we are also looking at like the biggest challenge that I face is actually having access to the data that I need to create those insights. Right now we are backward looking, so we look at market share, we look at retail sales, but we are behind. Like we're looking at August data in September.
Yeah.
Where I want to go is have that automated, but also be able to forecast. The challenge that I'm facing there is, since all of the companies pretty much just started doing e-commerce before COVID happened. Thanks to COVID, it did, grow as much as possible. There was just like unprecedented growth for e-commerce channel, and I think everybody, because was facing that similar challenge, all companies went ahead and like whatever best they could deliver to their customers, they went ahead and built that solution. So everybody is on a different solution within the companies. So the way they're looking at data, the way they're sharing data is also very different. So because of those disparate ways of doing things, I think one, the of data availability, the hierarchies, they're so very different. It's looking at that, getting that data, creating that data cleansing, creating the similar hierarchy so we can all talk about the same thing. I think would is one of the challenges that I would love to like solve, and then be able to forecast based on that, right? Because that I think is the future, right? If you can forecast and get to the customer what they want, being able to promote your products, being able to identify who your customer segment is and what they will be looking for like 2 months from now. Like, yes, we know there are seasonalities, but beyond the seasonalities, what can we do to get to our customers who love our products, or like someone who wants to try our products? How do we get to them?
And you talk about different tools, and but you also mentioned a single platform. So how are you thinking about, say, harmonizing all of that together?
So we use Snowflake for
Okay.
all our data needs. Anything that is submitted by our retail partners, be it through APIs, through SFTPs, through like SharePoint, Excel, whatever method that may be, everything gets ingested into our data lake. We have custom hierarchies built. We have some static maps that we then look at that data that we received, map it to that, and then so that everything is categorized and cataloged according to what we sell and what our catalog is, so that we can create insights out of that. And everything is then moved to Tableau for the business to easily visualize things and look at things that matter to them. So the Walmart team can go in and look at, oh, this is how we are doing in market share this month, or this is where the share of search is for me for this week. So there are dashboards that we create weekly. There are dashboards that we create monthly, depending on where we're getting the data from, and how we can reach out to our partners. And
Great.
similarly for supply chain and media, we're trying to like bring that in now, because now we have the capacity with the automation that we've built, being more agile. We've been able to improve on perfect screen. We've been able to get like faster to like be for our consumers, for our like sales partners to look at the perfect screen weekly, or let's say every other day. We have the capacity to start working on ingesting on what supply chain is looking at, what media is looking at, what are the data sources that they have, and how do we help them by ingesting that data and creating those insights that they need to reach out to their customers or promote. So like, I don't know if you heard about Velvetini, or like the bologna mask, like all these like in creative innovative products that the teams come out with, help through like with the data analytics, that what the customers are talking about. So I think that would be very, very helpful to see how they're doing in that sense.
And so you're now you brought up two very hot trends: supply chain and retail media.
Yes.
Talk to us about like how you're sort of, let's take retail media to begin with. Um, what is like every retailer now wants to be a media company. They're all launching sponsored search display and all that. They're all asking for dollars, and they have their own reasons on why they're asking. How do you think about, say, what is truly incremental? If I have $100 to spend in retail media, how do I allocate the $100 across 17 different retailers, leave alone their vehicles, the two or
Right.
three different vehicles that they have?
So I think that's where my role comes into play, right? Like being that central source of truth for analytics. Like how are our products working? Where are they working? And based on that, where should we spend that dollars on? So it'll be great to like so, and which is why we're starting to have these conversations with the Omni Shopper marketing team, with the media team, trying to see what their goals are. We just created like a 1 year and a 5 year plan. So looking at the roadmap and seeing where they're trying to put the dollars at, what are the different vendors they're working with, what are the different sources of data that they have, which basically I can take in just and then give them the insights to know where they're putting the money is actually worth, or if it's not, then how do we reallocate that money?
Okay, got it. So you're essentially looking at the return on investment in a way, but traditionally I've seen return on ad spend to be kind of a good metric when you're looking at Google and Facebook,
Yeah,
but
a
they
lot
may
of people
not.
talk about ROAS as well. I
Do
think
we like do you still look at ROAS on retail media, or are you looking beyond that on sales incrementality?
I think we're looking beyond just the ROAS.
Okay.
I think
Mm,
ROAS has existed. It's not going anywhere, but
mm,
I think it's time to look beyond ROAS.
mm. And is that sales incrementality that you end up
Yes,
looking at?
yes,
Got it.
definitely.
Got it. Very cool. So talking about supply chain, like, is first of all, remind me, is Kraft a supply constrained company, or do you have enough supply and is more demand constrained?
Um, Not really sure.
Okay, like like for instance, like manufacturing issue, do you have enough to fulfill all the POs that you're getting at this point, or is it like you're
I
backed
haven't
up?
heard anything
Okay,
about like
got it.
not being able to fulfill, but
Makes sense. Like I was
given
just talking to the folks from like the food industry or the baby food industry. They're talking about how like
the
Enfamil and those things are pretty supply constrained at this time. So
right, right.
now when we talk about supply chain, like in when you're we've been having a lot of issues with respect to how sporadic the POs have been, or manufacturing issues and maybe delays from the factories and all that. Labor constraints have been a big problem in the last couple of quarters. Stagnation is happening in terms of manufacturing lines and all that. Are you how what is the role of analytics to sort of make sure that that data is being accounted for in how you're making decisions for, say, promotions, or what you promote, what you advertise, and things like that?
So till last year, supply chain, we had a separate supply chain unit within e-commerce. With the new restructuring, supply chain is now very central
Mm,
because, like I mentioned, we are looking at omni-channel instead of like looking at e-commerce separately and looking at brick and mortar separately. Because I think there's advantages to looking at it together. So which is why supply chain is now more central. So I'm like more far from them than I was before. So all of these questions, very very good questions, and I would love to answer them. It's just that I haven't had the chance to get to those because we are a very lean team. There are business needs that we are still fulfilling. It's a very like it's just like making sure that the business is running, and which is why it's just like um, get those things business as usual, keep that running. Also look at our growth plan, create a roadmap for that, and then start having these conversations with these groups that we haven't had the chance to work with yet. So supply chain being one, media being the other one, is like how do we bring everything that they're doing, the challenges that they're facing, and how do we solve for those?
that's excellent. And switching gears again, team building. It's been very hard to get e-commerce talent of late, and it's becoming even harder. What is your thought in like what do you look for when you hire, and do you focus on grooming talent internally, or are you hiring for experience? Talk to us about your team building approach.
Sure. So like I said, we are omni-channel growth. So growth is like our key, the thing that ties us all together. So we're always looking to like growing in terms of what we want to achieve while also being lean in that sense. So talent is what grounds us, what keeps us growing. And it's at the end of the day, we need to prioritize those needs. And we are a very, very people focused organization, which is what I love about Craft. We demand diversity. We help grow the potential that we have within house, but that doesn't mean that we don't look externally. We will always support the whatever anybody has as their growth plan. we'll always help support that, build that internally. But there are times when you don't have that expertise in hand in within the whole organization. We don't only look within e-commerce, we also work with brick and mortar and see where those people are who want to move around and get those opportunities, and we readily make them available. But also, sometimes it's just like we need to get to the market, we need to get this done, and there is an expertise that exists outside. So how do we leverage that? So it's always a constant, like, we can build in-house and we can also go external, but how do we like combine them too to get to the market quicker as soon as we can, while also being very, very agile and lean.
And are there some core principles that you look for when you're hiring for your team in terms of, let's say, you know, uh, um, ability to learn things quickly, things like that? Is there a common theme that you've seen that has worked out for you when employees have worked out?
Absolutely. So yeah, culture is a big, big part, and that's one of the key things that we look at for any interview that we do, right? Like how do we see this person being part of the family? Let's say, it's the same thing, right? Like I said, people are the core to our company. So having those conversations during our whole interview process, and our HR team is amazing at that. They are able to have those conversations early on before we get to reach to the final stages, and everybody is looking for that common. We we demand diversity, we believe in our people, and that's what we go for when we are having those conversations. Of course, you cannot like minus that from the actual core skills that you need. And again, depends on what you're looking for. Like, do you need a data engineer versus a data scientist versus someone who has like media exposure or experience in that? So all of those definitely are something that everybody's looking for, but culture is a big part of it. And every interview that we do, that we make sure that we know, when you come in, you one are ready to like learn, you have that like focus to like continue to just like grow yourself and the company goals, and just be part of that.
Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.